passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. I'm thrilled to have Grant Baldwin on the show today. Grant is a speaker, coach, podcaster, and former franchise owner. He experienced the life of a franchisee, decided to go in another direction, and has since built a couple of successful businesses. Today, we're going to speak with Grant about his decision to become a franchisee, his experience as a franchisee, lessons learned, both good and bad, and a whole host of other interesting things. Hello, Grant, and welcome to the show.
What's up, buddy? Good to hang out with you today. It's an honor to be here.
Good to talk to you. I mean, I feel thrilled that you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit, and we're just going to have another conversation today.
A fireside chat.
A fireside chat that's going to be recorded. You know, it doesn't get better than that. So I'm not sure you want to name the franchise system. And we talked about that briefly, but can you maybe describe the franchise system that you were once a part of?
Yeah, it was actually a vending company, and there's a bunch of them out there, so we can be vague in that terms. But actually, in college, I had worked for a vending company and really enjoyed the experience. And I liked my wife and I. We had just got married. And so I enjoyed driving around on the truck and having a bunch of snacks there. And I liked the idea of a machine that sat there and collected money on our behalf, or I guess on the company's behalf, you know. So we'd go around and we'd fill machines up. And so it always just kind of stuck with us. And so, in fact, when we got married, we did that for a little bit and then bought a small little like gumball route. And this was just from an individual who had one locally. And so we had something like 30 or 40 of these little quarter machines around town. And so it was just kind of our first little taste of that vending stuff. And so we did that for a bit and made a couple bucks, but nothing substantial. You gotta turn a lot of quarters. And so then a couple years ago,
was that in addition to the vending, or was that part of your vending franchise?
That was no, that was just a separate thing. A couple years before the franchise stuff. So that was kind of our first taste of it, and we liked the vending concept, you know, the machine that sits there and collects money for you. So yeah, when I've been self-employed for about 8 years or so, and so when the business was kind of up and running and doing well, then we got intrigued by maybe getting back into the vending thing and doing it on the side, and so we started kind of researching some options and came across a franchise. There's several franchises in the vending space that were reputable and seemed to be well known. So we researched those and did our homework and talked to a bunch of people and jumped on with a company and did that for a bit. So that was kind of how we got into it and kind of how we got started with it.
Well, let's break this down a little bit, because there's a lot of people who are listening who are in the situation of trying to decide, should they buy a franchise? Perhaps should they buy a vending franchise? I know I've dealt with people who have purchased vending franchises, and I concur with you. I mean, it's something that seems very, very interesting, because again, you know, you put it in its place and it collects money for you, and then you go and replenish whatever's in the vending machine.
Right.
And that's essentially what you do. But I'm real big on honing in on the decision-making process, because I think a lot of people don't take the proper time to make good decisions. So take me back to that time when you and your wife were deciding on purchasing a franchise and what you did. You said you did your research, your due diligence. Talk to me about what you specifically did.
Well, one of the things that we did that I think was helpful was we talked with a lot of franchisees. And so we got names and numbers, and not just the ones that the franchisor would give you, because they're gonna want to put their best foot forward. So we just did our own homework and Googling other franchisees and finding them on Facebook, finding Facebook groups that consisted of these of some of the other franchisees, and just being able to reach out to them and say, give us the experience, give us the good, bad, ugly. If you were doing this all over again, what would you do? So because anytime you're just looking at just the marketing materials of a franchisor, they're putting their best foot forward, and so they want to make it sound as good and as sexy as possible. But it's important that you talk to people that are actually out in the field, and that was one kind of disconnect we found was with the franchisor at their headquarters, none of them were running the business on a day-to-day basis. So they weren't really sure about all the highs and lows and struggles. They were just kind of hearing it secondhand from franchisees. So it was helpful to talk to people that were actually in the field that were doing it and just hearing about what was working for them and then also what wasn't.
Did you talk to previous owners, people who had been a part of the system and then now were not when you were looking?
Well, kind of the maybe downside or the franchise as just the overall system was relatively new, because the way the company was set up originally was it was just basically a sales company, and so you could buy machines from them. They would help you find locations, and then you were just kind of independent of them. So it was just it just kind of helped you get up and going. And then they switched to the franchise model just about the time we got started, and so we kind of fell into that middle ground of people that were coming in on the tail end of one system and starting in on another system. So there really wasn't anyone else that we could talk to who is on the new system, which you take a risk in that, because there's no one else who has they don't have like a long track record that you can go off of whenever you're talking to a new franchise system. So that was definitely a downside to it. Was there was nobody that we could really talk to is in the current system, because the current system was just being built at the time.
So what was your number one reason then for deciding to go the franchise route as opposed to just doing it yourself? I mean, you'd already had some experience in it.
Yeah, we did have some experience, and it's not rocket science at all. But there is some stuff that it takes to get up and going. One of the things like with machines is I'm not a tech person at all. I don't understand that stuff. I don't even know how to use screwdrivers or hammer. I don't know any of that stuff. So I was worried, like, we're going to get some type of used machine and it's going to break on us, and I'm just going to be completely clueless. So I'd love to have the support of any type of just tech team we can call and troubleshoot us through some type of system and help us to know what to do to get a machine up and running again if those type of issues happen. And there's the community feel of having that support system, of being able to talk with other franchisees, of saying, hey, what's working for you? What's selling? What's not selling? Here's a potential location. Is this a good location or not? Would you move a machine here? This machine at this location is doing these kind of numbers. What do you think? Should I pull it out of that place? And so it helped a lot to have some of those people that you can kind of bounce ideas off of and get some feedback from. But that was kind of one of the things we were looking for initially. Was we didn't want to be. Our initial idea was we wanted to be somewhat passive, but it ended up taking a lot more time than I think we anticipated. My assumption would be that'd be the case with a lot of franchisees. I think a lot of times it's nice we like the idea of I'm gonna buy into the system. The system's going to kind of run itself, and I can just sit back and cash the check. And I think most franchises are going to take more time than people might realize.
They always do. I hate the saying "the business in a box." It just it makes me cringe, because it gives people the false impression that you just go and buy a business and it just runs for you, and they just don't. I mean, you have to go in, you have to work them. A lot of it comes down to location. A lot of it comes down to your obviously your territory, marketing, all those sorts of things. I think it's interesting what you said, and I don't think people don't talk about it enough, but you said something about, one of the reasons you were interested in the franchise was the whole community aspect of it. And I think that's a really, really good point. And I'm curious, after you signed and started in the franchise, did you feel like you were a part of a growing community, or did you feel maybe more isolated once you actually started? Because I hear that sometimes, where it's a lure in because of this whole community element. But a lot of times, once you get going and you start digging into the weeds of your business, you don't really take advantage, or people don't take advantage of that community aspect.
Yeah, what was really interesting in our situation was we really had the community aspect, but it was kind of outside the confines of the franchise. Is actually kind of how it played out, because
so you guys are going, these guys don't know what they're doing. We got to figure this out, right?
Yeah, well, in some ways, yeah, I think that was a bit of the case where there was a Facebook group that started, and there ended up being quite a few of franchises that got in there. And some of it, like I would say 90% of it was really, really good. of just kind of, hey, what snacks should I use? How do I find new locations? Here's an issue I'm having with a location. What should I do? And a lot of it was just pertaining to the business. But then there's a handful of people that started having red flags about the overall company, and it was a place to discuss it. And it wasn't like this authorized place or endorsed place that the franchise signed off on. It was kind of this thing that the franchise knew about, and they didn't like it. And there's like, well, this is our chance to talk to each other. So this is where it's going to happen. So I think it kind of built a rift kind of between the franchisee and the franchisor, of people who are going, hey, we've got a lot of money invested in it, and if we're not getting the support from you, we're going to go to each other. And most of the time we are going to be supporting each other, but there's going to be times where probably we're just going to vent some frustration about you. And that seemed to be what happened. But from the community standpoint, that Facebook group was massively, massively helpful. But it was just kind of hypothetically this underground, off the radar type of group.
So, what are some of the things you learned after the fact that you said to yourself, "Golly, I wish I would have known that before I bought the franchise"?
Yeah, good question. I want to give you a good answer on this one.
Well, no, I mean, there may not be anything. I mean, just whatever it was. I mean, I just find sometimes people say, gosh, I've had people tell me, oh yeah, hey, I talked to 5 franchisees. I wish I would have talked to 10, or I talked to current owners, but I didn't talk to previous owners, or I just talked to the owners that they recommended, those kinds of things, where people can look back. I'm just curious if you had any of those moments.
I would say, obviously, I would say the more reputable the longer the track record of the franchise, the better. If you've got the big one, the Papa John's, the Subways, the Jimmy John's of the world, they've been around for a while, and they have good systems, and they probably have good people there. Otherwise, they wouldn't. And I'm sure there's, you're going to have those bad apples in the bunch. But for the most part, they've got good systems in place. We were coming in with what was a pretty new franchise, so I think they were kind of learning a franchise system. We were trying to learn their franchise system. So we're all kind of learning together, and they weren't entirely sure what they were doing at times, and probably we weren't entirely sure what we were doing at times. So it was kind of that awkward thing. The other thing I would say would be, if possible, depending on how much the investment is that you're making, but the bigger the investment, I wish we would have met with the people before we signed on, because we had signed on, then we went out to some training at their company, and we got out there. It was my wife and I went out there for a couple days, and when we were out there, there's just a couple little things that were happening that just kind of raised red flags to us, and just kind of gave us that feeling where you can't really put your finger on it. But I remember there was like one social thing going on at night, and we just skipped out on it. And we were back at the hotel, and we were both like, can we trust these people? Like, they already have our money.
Wow.
We're already in this. And
that's huge,
like,
Grant. That's huge. I can't. Yeah. Wow. So you didn't even meet them? You didn't even meet them before you signed?
No, I mean, we'd spent, and I think that's one of the frustrating things is there's a lot of, and I keep in touch with a couple of the people that are still franchisees with them. And we were all like, we're smart people. It's not like we're dumb people. A lot of us are already business owners. We're successful. And so there was, I had done a lot of homework. I felt like we'd done due diligence, and even when we were out there, it wasn't like anything blatant, but just a few little things where you're kind of like, well, that was weird. Like, why did they say that? Or this seems interesting, or So, and whenever you're doing something like a franchise, it's not, I think our total investment was, it was around 50,000 or something. So it was a very substantial amount, but it's not, we're not talking $1 million investment here. That we just threw at somebody. So yeah, it was, that was kind of the first point where we're kind of looking at each other like, well, what have we got ourselves into? This will be,
that's huge. That's actually, that's huge on many levels. I mean, I think there's many lessons in that. And by the way, I mean, just saying that is going to help a lot of people, who won't do that. I mean, it's like when people ask me about, should I talk to a franchisee before buying? I always say, yeah, and try to go meet them in person.
Yeah.
because it's much more difficult for somebody to look you in the face and BS you than it is over the phone. Or, when you're across from somebody or in a room with somebody, you can kind of tell, what's the eye contact like? What's their inflection? What are they doing? Are they doing things that make you maybe not believe them? You know what I mean?
Right.
That you just can't get. So that's huge. I mean, that's huge to actually meet the people. But to your point, I hear you. I mean, you look at the system and you look at everything and you talk to other people and you go, well, golly, I mean, this looks like a pretty good deal, and for what we're looking for, this looks like a pretty viable business.
Yeah, and they, to their credit, I mean, they're really good at sales and marketing. And in fact, later, like one of the things I'd heard was one of the founders had told someone that we are a sales and marketing company that just happens to be in vending. So it wasn't like they were in a vending company. It's just they were really, really good at sales and marketing, and so they were really good at putting the best foot forward. And there's a lot of, and again, they're not I wouldn't say that they're necessarily like a shady, horrible company by any means. But yeah, there's just several things that happen that where you're just kind of like, that just seemed weird, and kind of raised some red flags and kind of leaves a weird taste in your mouth that kind of leaves you questioning what you got yourself into.
So, I mean, given what you know and your experiences and what you've gone through, would you still buy a franchise if the right opportunity came about?
Boy, at this point, it'd have to be the really, really right opportunity, and I think a franchise would work well if you're someone who, I think if you're someone who you definitely have the extra income to spend, and you've got the extra income that you can lose. Because in fact, we ended up selling the business and selling it outside of the franchise system, and were able to be let go from them. And so we sold it to some friends, and they own the route free and clear of the franchise, and they run it, and it's done well for them. But we had it for about a year and a half or so. And it was basically a break even for us. So it was more stress than it was worth. But I think if you had the income to put into it, and to have it be a passive thing for you, a truly passive thing where you could hire people to run it for you, that was just really more of an investment and kind of a hands-off thing, it might be a decent fit. But really what you're buying is you're buying yourself a job, is what it comes down to. And again, we were doing it on a very, very part-time basis. But if you're buying a significant franchise that's open, 7 days a week for whatever business hours, then you're buying yourself a job, and you got to be there. And it's definitely going to take a lot more involvement than I think people realize.
Well, I think what's interesting too, at least in your experience, where even after a year and a half, you sell it and you don't make anything, but you don't really lose anything. It's almost like you had the ability over a course of a year or did you say it was a year and a half?
Yeah, about a year and a half.
Year and a half to really get some great business know-how, on the job know-how of running a business and different things that come up. So I'm sure from that perspective, I'm sure it's benefited you in some of the other businesses that you've been involved in, which is really where I want to segue into and just kind of talk about. I mean, since owning and selling your franchise, you've really gone on to do some really cool things, create and build a very successful speaking career, and do some other things. And I'd love for you to take a few minutes and talk about that process and that transformation from being the franchisee to now creating your own business.
Yeah, well, we were doing our own business before the franchisee. So I had been a full-time speaker for about 8 years or so. And when the speaking business had been running for about 4 or 5 years, and it was doing well, and it was kind of, in some ways, it was on autopilot, then it was a lot easier to say, okay, I can go out and speak a couple times a month and provide a great living for our family. But there's also a lot of days that I'm home, and I'd love to be investing into something else, maybe some other type of business. So that's when we first started looking into it. So we already had our business up and running for a while and had some really good systems in place. But I think that's a great lesson that any business can pull from a franchise. Is franchises are very, very, very systematized, and so they have it very well outlined. You do. I've always heard, like with a McDonald's, that you could have anybody come into a McDonald's tomorrow and go through their playbook and be able to get it up and running, because there's no room for error. And the franchise system, for good or bad, it doesn't require you to think. And so you just come in and you just do step 1, step 2, step 3, and you always are going to arrive at the same outcome if you go through their process. So that was one thing that I think was beneficial, is to see some of that and to see exactly how they have their systems and structures set up, and looking for ways that I can apply those to my own businesses.
Well, see, that's interesting, because I didn't realize that you had done the speaking before the franchise. And I'm wondering if after the franchise, did you start implementing more systems, or had you already systematized it? You said it was pretty much on autopilot, which is another story in and of itself. How do you get a speaking career on autopilot? I mean, how does that work?
Right. Well, and in some ways, there's still the manual part of going. I have to get on a plane and go somewhere. So there's still that part of the business. But in terms of finding business, booking business, the nice thing is about the longer you do anything in any type of service business, assuming you provide a good product, then the easier it is to get business. So whether you are an attorney, whether you are a speaker, whether you are you do lawn care, whatever that thing is, the longer you do it, the more word can spread about you, and the easier it is to get bookings. So once we would get a booking, then I had an assistant in place who's been with me for about 6 years now, who was with me before the franchise and after the franchise. And so between myself and her, we've had really, really good systems of once we book something, what happens from there, and all the steps that go into it of contracts and booking travel and setting up calls and making sure that we have all the details and logistics straight. And after the event, what do we do on invoicing and all those just moving pieces. And when you have so many moving pieces for one event, and then you multiply that out and you do 50 or 60 a year, then, it's a lot of moving pieces, but it's a pretty well-oiled machine. And so even today, the speaking business doesn't require a lot to continue to get business and to have the business continue to run. But like you said, at the end of the day, I still have to go somewhere and speak. But on the in-between talks, it doesn't require as much as it did when we were getting started.
So with your speaking, I mean, you're speaking to youth, right? You're speaking to high schoolers, is that right?
Yeah, it's a lot of high schoolers. We also do a lot with college students, a lot of young professionals, but then we also do some stuff with teachers and parents. But a lot of it for the past several years has been with high school students, and then we've kind of evolved and pivoted a bit more and do a lot more with colleges and young professionals now. But yeah, the bulk of it has been with high school students.
So how's that been? Tell me about your pivot, because I know you've been working on that, and what have you been pivoting towards, and in terms of, obviously, I know the different segment, but what are you hoping that people are going to gain from your speeches?
Well, the challenge with speaking, and this will lead into the kind of the pivot and transition we're making, but the challenge with speaking, just like any service-based business, is it just doesn't scale. So it's one person on one stage talking to one audience at one given time. And so while I may get a really, really good paycheck for going to speak, I still have to go somewhere to speak. So I don't like that model of if I'm sick, or if I want to just stay home, or if I want to be with my family, or if I want to take a vacation, or if I want to take a month off, then whenever I turn the spigot off, money's not coming in. So I have to go out and continually turn the spigot on. So we're trying to transition to build more of an audience, do something a little more online. And part of the challenge with the audience that I've built with speaking is 16 and 17-year-olds are a lot of fun to speak to, and I can do a great school assembly. I can do a great presentation for 1,000 teenagers, but they make a horrible online audience. So it's not like they're subscribing with email to email lists. It's not like they're buying courses or coaching or consulting online. So at this point, we got to shift a little bit to find some different audiences that would have the ability to do something more along those lines. And maybe we can still talk about some of the same stuff we've talked about with students, because a lot of what we've talked about with students is figuring out what they want to do with life, helping them think through career stuff. We talk a lot about responsibility and help them realize life can be whatever you want it to be, but it's up to you to make it happen. So, we can do a lot of that same stuff a lot of that same message within a different context and talking to 20, 30, 40 somethings. And so it's not that much different, but we're just kind of framing it in a different way for a different audience.
So, and that's such a big message. How are you framing that? How are you niching that down, or are you niching that down? How's that been for you, especially in the online space?
Well, it definitely helped to have a lot of speaking experience and have some credibility in different niches that can kind of help me get going. So, the big thing that we did was almost a year ago, we started a podcast called How Did You Get Into That? And because people kept asking me that as a speaker, they would ask me that exact question of how did you get into that? And it wasn't, and I found people were in one of two categories. Either people wanted to become a speaker and they just wanted to know how you actually do it. Or some people were like, I wouldn't necessarily want to be a speaker. That's just fascinating that that's how you make a career. So how did you get into that? So we started thinking that would be an interesting type of show. Like, what if you just interviewed people that were doing something interesting and fascinating? And some of those people would be people that you'd want to emulate. That's the kind of career you'd want to have. And some of them would be like, okay, that's not necessarily what I'd want to do. It's just fascinating. If that guy or if that girl can make a living doing that, then surely I can figure out my thing. Because I found a lot of people that reach out to us, a lot of people we talk to would say, I don't really hate my job. I don't really love my job. I'm not really sure what I'd rather be doing different. And so we've hopefully provided a bunch of interviews and stories and journeys of people who are finding work that they really, really love and just talking through how do you make that transition from something you hate to something you love, and hopefully inspiring people with other stories.
No, that's really, really great. I mean, I think that, well, first of all, your podcast is fantastic. You've done a really great job with that. Not only do you get great guests, but you do great interviews, man. You have you ask really good questions. So I really, really enjoy it, and I
appreciate that.
Other people to listen to that. I know we got to run here in a minute, but I want you to take time to tell people where they can reach out to you, and maybe leave them with one or two things that that you best learned from going through the franchise experience, in terms of not just through the ownership of the business, but how it's helped you to this point, and then we can say goodbye. Yeah,
well, I appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you, and everything you can find at grantbaldwin.com. Again, that's grantbaldwin.com. And the podcast is How Did You Get Into That? Some cool stories there. Would love for people to come check it out. But in terms of the franchise stuff, I would say that do your due diligence, and even when you think you've done it, do a little more. Because like I said, I feel like I'm a fairly sharp business guy, and go into opportunities and business transactions with my eyes wide open. But this was one where we walked in and kind of not necessarily felt blindsided, but just felt like, well, that was some of that stuff didn't add up, and that didn't make any sense. Looking back, there were several things that we probably could have done differently. I talked to a franchise attorney that we met with several times, and she pointed out to us, she's like, hey, just a heads up, this is a brand new franchise, so they don't have any track record, so you don't have anything to look back on. And even their past operators, they may have had a great experience, but they're running a different system than you're going to run, so you need to be heads up on that. And I remember reading a franchise book, and I don't remember the name of it. You might remember it, but it was a book that was recommended to me by a few people, and read it. And the whole book was basically, and I think he even said it in the introduction, like the goal is to get you to not do a franchise. He was trying to talk you out of it. And so it's just like, you just got to be heads up on some of that stuff, that really when you go into a franchise, you are playing by their rules. And so you are buying a system and you are buying a name. Those are the two things I've always heard, is you're buying a system and you're buying a name. And this company we worked with, they had a decent system. What they didn't really have a strong name. So it's not a strong name like a McDonald's, or it's not a strong name like a Subway or a Domino's or any of those, major franchises where you just hang that sign and you open the door and all of a sudden you got massive traction because of the track record that they've built. So I think you just got to be really, really heads up to some of that stuff. And so if possible, I would recommend working with franchises that have a track record of what's the right amount of time. I don't know, 3 years, 5 years, but they've been around the block a few times, and that they're probably going to be around for a while versus something that may be brand new.
No, that's really, really great information. I was talking with somebody the other day about a new franchise, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, really, when you're a new franchise, you don't have any brand name. You might have it locally, but you don't have it on a national level. And so the real benefit becomes your system. And so you as the potential franchisee just need to really be certain that you need that system, because that's essentially what you're buying at that point. Who knows what it grows into, but you're essentially buying that system. You got to say to yourself, is it worth me paying this fee, paying these royalties, or is this a system I could create by myself? Well, I really appreciate your time, Grant, and you taking the time to talk about this. Is fantastic speaking with you and interviewing you, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thanks, buddy. Always enjoy hanging out.
Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria.